What is your biggest financial concern? Are you being as intentional with your finances as you could be? How confident are you that you'll reach your financial goals? How will life's transitions impact your financial plan? Welcome to the Clarity and Confidence for Life podcast with Tom Fleishel, founder, president, and CEO of Fleishel Financial Associates. Discover how we can help business owners, successful families, and corporate executives achieve clarity and confidence for life while providing tailored financial solutions that eliminate complexity and free you up to focus on what really matters in life to you and your family. Now, on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Clarity and Confidence for Life podcast with your host, Tom Fleishel, where we help you get clear about your goals so you have confidence moving forward. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Great. Thank you.
Well, we have a house full today, Tom. What's going on?
Well, we have a couple of wonderful special guests that we're going to have today talking about the topic of helping our aging parents. We definitely are excited to jump into this topic. It's one that a lot of our clients are experiencing. We've experienced it our own selves personally. So it's definitely something that are on people's minds. And so we're looking forward to addressing some of these issues.
Yeah, so we have Amanda Stahl and David Marsh here to have the discussion with. Welcome, guys, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's get into it, Tom.
So yes, Amanda, I'd like to start with you. When we think about this, what's going on we start dealing with our parents and all the things that we have to address. Why is it important to plan ahead for aging as it relates to financial, housing, and especially caregiving needs?
Sure. Well, of course, longer lifespans, we're having to think about what that time period is going to look like. And it's really important to be proactive versus reactive. If you're reactive, you're going to take a stressful time and make it a lot more stressful. So if you already have that plan in place, thinking about what that's going to look like, it can really help make a chaotic time a little bit easier for the individual and for the family. So really thinking through, who is the support team? Does somebody have multiple children? Maybe one handles the healthcare, one handles the finances, one handles the house. Do they not have family nearby? Do they think about the support of a senior care manager and all the different professionals out there that can help that we're going to touch on? But it's really, really important to have those elder care living preferences documented, discussed, and make sure everybody is in agreement, especially with the prevalence of dementia and cognitive impairment, making sure those individuals can share their wishes and how they would like to age when they're able to clearly express those wishes.
Yeah, I think, it's important discussion of who's going to do what. A lot of family members have all different skill sets and where they are geographically, all those types of things come to play in it. That's probably true, right?
Absolutely.
So how can you really approach parents or other aging loved ones about their finances when it comes to these situations? We're experiencing that right now with my mother-in-law, and she's 82. She's in a mental facility where she's got some acuity issues. She's got dementia. My wife, her daughter, is pretty much handling all the finances. She's got a guardianship, and that's working out fine now. But, how do we approach that typically?
So a lot of older individuals, that loss of independence can be really stressful. So how can you think about offering a helping hand versus taking over the finances? And for example, we use a tool called EverSafe where you're able to add a layer of family financial caregiving and get insights into the older individual's accounts without having to be logging in and taking over the accounts. But like you're talking about with guardianship and making sure all of that documentation is in place before somebody needs it is also really important.
So, the issue of dealing with the loss of independence, and here they were the parents and they knew everything. And now you're having to transition into that role. And okay, mom, it's time to step aside. Okay, dad, I know you used to manage your finances, but I don't think you're doing a good job and we're going to have to take over. How's that going to go over?
That can be a very tough conversation for families to have. And what we recommend doing, because it really is that role reversal where the kids are kind of in more of that supervisory parental role, and it can be really uncomfortable for people. If that's something you're having a hard time with, leverage the professionals in that older individual's life, or bring in somebody like a geriatric care manager or a senior care manager to sit down and talk with them and do an assessment and help them understand how it's really all about keeping them safe and helping them keep that independence for longer. So leverage those professionals to come in and offer that third party expert opinion versus the kids really trying to tell the parents what to do. It doesn't usually go too well.
Yes, for sure. Tell me a little bit more about this EverSafe that you mentioned just a minute ago.
Yeah, so EverSafe, it's fraud and identity theft protection, and they have specialized features for seniors. So you would go in and put on your online bank accounts, usernames, passwords. They're going to monitor and see if there are any anomalies or anything off or different, unusual on the accounts. But the great thing is that they can set up trusted advocates. So those individuals that are maybe getting the monitoring can set up their adult children, other trusted loved ones to receive their alerts alongside them. And that's just going to help stop financial fraud before things can really snowball. A lot of times with elder fraud, things can kind of get out of hand and they're not telling somebody that something's going on, or they're not realizing exactly what's happening. And a lot of money can be lost before the family understands that that's happening. So for those trusted loved ones to have insights onto the accounts and receive their alerts alongside them can be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great tool. I think everybody should know about that. So David, let me ask you, so what type of information should you have access to in order to help your parents with their finances?
Well, some of the things you can do is review with your parents, their trusted loved ones, trusted contacts on all accounts. So what I mean by that is somebody that you trust, your wife, for example, your spouse, your brother, or whoever it may be. Make sure that the financial institution knows there's a trusted contact on file. You can also help locate all your parents' financial accounts, their documents, wills, trust, insurance policies, and store all those in a safe, if applicable, or even a safety deposit box at your local bank. And then online access to accounts, you might want to know passwords and security questions.
But what authority do they have to have in order to get that information? Do they need a power of attorney in order for them to really be able to access and be in that regard? Or is it that's just access to information? They really don't need a power of attorney.
Yeah, you wouldn't need a power of attorney for some of that information, especially if you're, talking to your mom or your dad and they give you all their password information. That's just a one-on-one kind of relationship. And then having a trusted contact at the financial institution is just a requirement from FINRA rule number 4512.
What does that entail? What access or what information does a trusted contact have?
It's just basically a trusted contact that could call on behalf of the person. Typically, though, there's they do need to have the other person on the line if they want to give out personal information.
It's really for the advisor to be able to contact the trusted contact in case they notice something is off or unusual, and the trusted contact doesn't have access to any account information or anything like that.
Yeah.
Dave, what does it mean when somebody has the trusted contact authority? What does that make them eligible for?
Well, it's not really an authority. It's just a trusted contact to the financial institution will have you on file in case something suspicious is going on with the accounts of your loved one. So you don't actually have the authority to call in and move money around and things of that nature. That would require some extra steps like a power of attorney and things of that nature.
Well, who would be the best types of people to have as a trusted contact for a parent, let's say?
Well, their children, just somebody that's trusted, somebody that they trust,
Could be a friend, could be a close friend, could be a family member. Okay.
Exactly.
So yeah, when we start seeing signs, that it's time, what are some of the triggers that we know are going to be out there that we should be looking for it's time that we should step in and see if we can do more for our parents at this point?
Well, Tom, that's part of why having a trusted contact is so important. A lot of times financial advisors or other people that work with individuals on different financial matters are the first to notice changes in cognitive ability, because the financial principles and those concepts could be some of the first things to go. So if the client is no longer understanding or comprehending financial concepts that they used to, that's when you would use that trusted contact. So important to have that in place. just changes in cognitive ability and also personality. Are they not keeping up with hygiene in a way that they used to? Are they not finding things humorous that maybe they used to? And really important to rely on that older individual's network of doctors to help the family member understand when it's time to step in. So again, not trying to take over, but really relying on experts to help inform that. And again, an assessment from a senior care manager or a geriatric care manager can be really helpful in those instances.
How do you find somebody like that, a senior care manager or whatever? How do you find those people?
Raymond James has an approved relationship with a company called Broadspire Care Management, and there are also an organization called Aging Life Care Associates. So a couple of different ways that you can get engaged with those care managers. Definitely look for somebody that's certified and has good reviews, and they can certainly help find somebody in your area.
That's awesome. I do have a little situation that I just heard about yesterday. I met with an estate attorney, and he told me about a family situation where one of the heirs came in and basically started closing accounts, changed the address, moved assets, all kinds of malfeasance that was occurring. And they finally caught up with what was going on, but it was a nightmare after this person was prepared to be under arrest when they're having a hearing. And, so how do you, with families and these situations, how do you prevent these kind of things from happening? What are some ways from your experience that we can make sure our clients, our parents and so forth are protected?
Unfortunately, elder fraud oftentimes is committed by the hands of a family member or somebody that's helping. And it's not right, but sometimes they feel I'm helping, I'm due some money for this work that I'm doing, or I'm going to get this inheritance eventually. Why not just take a little bit now? Obviously, that is not okay. But making sure that more than one person has insights into what's going on the accounts. So something like an EverSafe, you can set up those trusted advocates, have multiple people as the trusted advocate. Maybe there are a couple of adult children or a niece or nephew. And so you don't necessarily want the person getting the alerts to be that one that's closest with the individual or the one that's handling the finances. It's good to just have that checks and balances in place and maybe have some other people involved as well.
So I guess this next question is for both of you. How can professionals help with the whole process of caring for our aging parents? How does that work?
Sure. So we talked about the support team. A lot of times that's close family members or friends. We need support for the support team. Caregiving is a huge undertaking, not only time-wise, but financially as well. And there are so many aging specialists out there and different professions that people might not know about. So we talked about geriatric care managers or senior care managers. There are also individuals like senior move managers, where they specialize in coming in, downsizing, helping with selling items that the family no longer wants. So maybe somebody's transitioning into assisted living, or they just want to move into a smaller place, and the attic is filled with 30 years of stuff. Bring in that senior move manager. They can help understand what's of value, what just needs to be tossed or donated. Also, certified aging in place specialists. So these are typically contractors that have a certification in how do I make my home safe so that I can live here for as long as possible. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too, and what that looks like, but it can be as easy as things like pulling up area rugs, adding additional lighting. And so just being proactive and making that home a little bit safer to help people maintain that independence for as long as possible.
Some of the other professionals might include your elder care attorneys, estate planning attorneys, financial planners, even a real estate professional or a banker. Could help with financing your needs.
One of the things we really try to stress with our practice and our methodology and how we help our clients is you've got all these different segmented, siloed issues for most people. You've got your investments, your tax situation, your estate planning, your insurance and cash flow and retirement planning, all those things. And typically there's not a lot of good coordination. And if you don't have it coordinated together properly, there could be some lurking landmines to come back and bite you. And especially when you had all these different people within the whole, if you have a financial planning firm and you have an insurance person and you've got an estate attorney and you've got your CPA, if they're not talking to each other, that can be a real problem. And usually there's not going to be too many people that are going to want to coordinate that whole thing. So we try to do that, especially in these situations, because as you just mentioned, there's a whole team of people that need to coordinate and work together, and they can't just be out there siloed doing their own things. So that's kind of where we feel like that's so important, that we really try to coordinate and work together with all the other professionals. So let's talk about a little bit more about the aging and housing options. So that's another whole thing that we have to deal with. So what types of housing options should people consider as they age? I know there's some transitions that we can talk about.
Sure. So vast majority, according to U.S. News and World Report, over 93% of adults over age 55, they want to age in place. And that just means I'm going to stay in my home. This is where I'm going to age. I don't want to move in with a family member. I don't want to go into a care residence or a nursing home. And so how do we help them achieve that? And people can really create almost an aging in place assisted living facility in their home, leveraging different technologies and leaning on family members and professionals. So it is doable, but it does take that proactive effort and that planning. If somebody falls and breaks a hip and then they're in rehab and they want to go back home, but there's, a flight of stairs to get up to the bedroom or to get into the house, that's not really going to be feasible. So as you're thinking about aging in place, what are those elements of universal design that you want to have in your home? And, it says, adults over age 55 want to age in place. 55 is young, but that's the time you need to start thinking about it, because you want to build those potential costs for a home remodel, whether that's the bathroom or what's that going to cost to add a ramp, into your financial plan, so that you're not 80 and you need an accessible bathroom. Well, at that point, it's too late. You're not going to be able to go back home after the rehab facility. So how do we plan ahead and make that happen? So the three main things are: enter the home with no steps, bedroom and bathroom on the ground floor, and be able to roll a ball into the shower. So those are the three main things. I do think the bathroom is what people need to think about when they're planning ahead. Maybe I'm 60 and I'm doing a bathroom remodel. Go ahead and just do it now. It's not going to hurt. I know it might not feel good. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And wouldn't it be a shame if that's the only reason you couldn't go back home, because you have a bathtub? That's not really ideal. So let's make life a little bit easier. But really talking to the family, understanding. Some people say, I never want to live with my kids. Others say, I never want to go into a nursing home. What does that look like? And then also understanding the different types of senior care. It's really going to be dependent on the need. Let's think about something like an Alzheimer's diagnosis. That can be 10 or 15 years of this progression of different care that's needed. Maybe at first they're at home, they're fine being independent, still leveraging some technology so the family can keep an eye on what's going on. There are different things where you can monitor making sure the stove got turned off, or making sure somebody got out of bed in the morning, or that they didn't leave the house. Then maybe the family member is there, or they're working with home health care, and then maybe eventually they need to go into a memory care facility or some types of other, nursing home. So it can really be that progression. Lots of different options out there, but again, working with a senior care manager or another professional in the area, they can help vet home health care, find care residences in the area, and really provide a lot of value to the family as they navigate that potential transition.
Yeah, my wife and I, we built our home. We have 2 stories, and we have a regular staircase, but kind of from the kitchen upstairs, there's a spiral staircase, and that was kind of for our kids to go up and down. But when we get older, we're going to be able to remove that and put an elevator. So there you go.
Perfect. Perfect.
At least that's the plan. So, so what can we do to help our parents transition and manage a perceived loss of independence? How do we go about having that conversation?
That's really tough. You just want to respect their wishes as much as possible. I use the example of my grandparents. My grandfather is 88. He lives in St. Louis. In the 90s, he attempted to retire to Florida. He lasted about 8 months. They did the whole thing, sold their house in St. Louis, bought a place in Florida, made the move, and he went right back to St. Louis. He doesn't want to leave St. Louis. That's his community. He's got his church, his bakery where he likes to go and get his donuts, etc. And we are trying to respect that for as long as possible, even though a lot of our family is in Florida, and it would be a lot easier for them to be down here with us because we could step in and help a lot more easily. But we want to respect his wishes. Even things like if somebody is going to move into an assisted living facility, can they bring their pet cat? Can they bring their furniture? Can they cook? all these different things that can help them still feel at home, still have that independence, not like they're moving into some hospital setting. We really want to help people remain as comfortable as possible. And again, I keep harping on it, but that feeling of independence, you don't want to take that away. I think we all got that feeling of independence when we turned 16 and got that driver's license, or whenever you started driving. And, let's say 70, 80 years down the road, all of a sudden it's gone. That's really tough transition. But really be involved, thoughtful from the family members, whoever is involved in the care. I really like another tool we use called EverPlans. They have an elder care living questionnaire, and it gets really into the nitty gritty of, do you want to have your own furniture? Do you want to have a roommate? Do you want to be able to cook? Do you want to stay in your own home, a family member's home, a care facility? And I talked about this already, but with that, just the prevalence of dementia and with diminished capacity, it's so important to understand what their wishes are and have that all documented. Also makes it easier for the family. Maybe a couple of siblings, they're arguing over what's going to happen. No, let's go back and see what dad told us and try to respect that as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and having those wishes written out, most people are not going to do that. That's not something that people are going to think to do. We try to encourage clients, for example, on the legacy heirlooms of the family, who's supposed to get what. When my father passed away, he was a wonderful artist. And so there's some little bit of a problem with who's going to get what artwork. Yeah. But all those kind of instructions are helpful. So David, what are some of the financial considerations? Lots of times people, unfortunately, as much as we try to talk about things like long-term care that hasn't been planned, what are some of the ways that we can just try to think through these issues?
With proper planning, you can obviously get long-term care insurance in place, but as you mentioned, some people don't plan that. It might come down to selling your primary residence. It also might come down to working with banks and using bank products, or with proper planning, you could work with an elder care attorney and look into doing Medicaid planning. But that does take proper time as well. So those are some of the issues you should talk with your parents about, making sure they have plenty of time to plan ahead instead of waiting for the last minute.
So, there's all this Medicare planning that has to happen, and everybody gets a little confused with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so what are some of the things we need to be looking for in our Medicare plan options?
Yeah, so Medicare obviously is a program for people 65 and older, and it is important to have the proper Medicare insurance in place to cover what Medicare does not cover. Medicare covers about 60% of your healthcare needs in retirement. So what you need to have is some sort of Medigap policy to cover the rest. And you can, as you mentioned, A, B, C, and D, you can get original Medicare with A and B and cover that with a Medigap policy, which has an alphabet behind it as well. And that's important to take in consideration as far as where your area you live in, what kind of network of doctors you have. Some of the other types of insurances you can use is a Medicare Advantage policy, which typically have some lower cost up front, but they'll have cost when you use the product, and they are geographically limited, if you will, and the networks are limited. So having a proper Medigap policy in place will allow you to pretty much go anywhere in the country and see any doctor that accepts Medicare, and you're not beholden to a network of doctors, whereas a Medicare Advantage would. So it's very important to work with a trusted source, and we have one here at Raymond James called ClearMatch, who helps people mitigate the Medicare system, if you will, and get them the proper coverage. They work through all 50 states, and they can really pinpoint your locations. Some states are different than other ones. Here in Florida, for example, we have great Medicare Advantage plans, Medigap policies, but in some more rural areas, the Medicare Advantage plan might not work for you at all. So it's important to get a good Medigap policy in place.
So yeah, that's great. Thank you, Amanda. Now we need to really start, if we have aging parents, loved ones, how do we start this conversation? What do you think are some of the best ways that we can approach this?
I think the first step is just bringing it up. And as the holidays approach, when families together, that might be a good time to talk about it. Also using almost yourself as an excuse. That adult child might be in their 40s, 50s, 60s. Mom and dad, I've been thinking about my long-term care plan, or my financial advisor is talking to me about long-term care insurance, and we've never really talked about that. Like, what is your ideal situation? What do you want that to look like? And I know it's tough and people might not always be willing to have that conversation, but with just that caring persistence, bring it up softly, get them comfortable talking about it. Use your friend's parents as an example, or maybe a family member's story. I think really illustrating it for people. I mean, my grandparents, again, my grandmother had a stroke at 60. My grandfather has been her full-time caregiver for the past 20 plus years. Well, now he's in his late 80s. It's getting a lot tougher. So how do we navigate that? They're a perfect example of, we didn't think our retirement was going to look like this. So what is that plan in place, and how are we going to navigate that? So again, some people say, I never want to live with my kids. Others say, I never want to go into a nursing home. What is their personal preference, and how are you going to help them feel comfortable and maintain that independence for as long as possible?
I do have a lot of conversations with clients about planning for long-term care, and I have heard every possible excuse of why they don't think they need that. And it's just amazing. Some of the reasons, I'm just going to go jump off a cliff. My son will take care of me. I'm just going to end up. No. Okay. Let's be real. These are things that need to be addressed and talked about. And let's not just brush it under the rug. And yes, it might not ever happen, but you don't want to be caught if it does. And so that's kind of why we just try to help people think through and really try to plan. And, even in our own personal situation, I mentioned, with my wife, her dad died at 87. Mom was in advanced dementia stage. We needed to get a guardianship. None of those documents were in place. He didn't even have a will. Mm-hmm. He was one of those old timers. He was a successful accountant for a huge firm, but said, if I get a will, I'm going to die. I guess that was his mentality. So he never got any of those documents. So he said, well, everything will be taken care of because, I have beneficiary designations. The house is in joint name. Everything should be good. Well, it really wasn't. My wife had to go up to Georgia, spend several months to settle the estate, get mom's guardianship established, then move the guardianship down to Florida, which was a nightmare. So all these things could have been avoided in some form or fashion with some proper planning. Now, the guardianship may or may not have been. What are some of the proper documentations, and how can the financial professionals help to make sure that in this situation that we now are going to be possibly in, that we can have everything in order should the situation arise, that there's mental acuity issues and there's maybe a need for a guardianship or something like that?
So as far as how financial planners, professionals can help is working with potential scenarios and building that into their financial plan. We do have certain cost of care calculators that we can use to show the exact care of the nursing home in your area. And then you can also put in the proper insurance and managing risks that are associated with the aging. And then, of course, you can review any sort of documentation, medical directives, power of attorney, durable power of attorney, all those kinds of things with the estate planning attorney to make sure those are in place for the person and their needs in the future.
And that's another subject that's a little bit more difficult to address with parents. Mom and dad, what have you put into place for your estate planning documents? Are those things all in order, and are they situated the way they need to be? That's another difficult conversation. I don't know if, Amanda, you have a thought about that, and we'll wrap up with that. But I just think that, those are this whole process of trying to prepare everybody for what the inevitable is going to be. It's just tough. It's tough.
It's really tough. I think it can be a generational thing too. People might not want their kids or their heirs to know what they might be receiving in a will or a trust, so they kind of keep it secretive. But just letting the family know where everything is located. Also, when was it last updated? Was this 30 years ago? Do we need to look at this again? So just making sure that things are up to date and easily accessible by the family, even if you don't want them to necessarily have access to it yet. That's okay. I understand that. But how do we just make sure everything is organized and accessible? Because again, that's a really stressful situation, the loss of a loved one. How do we make that a little bit less stressful for the family that's involved?
One of the things we found that's worked very well is something called a family summit. We get, we got family members in different states, and mom and dad are here. So we set up a Zoom if we have to do it that way. And we really just go through what are the basics of what our estate plan looks like. We don't have to get into particulars of the numbers, but what's supposed to happen? Is Johnny going to be the successor trustee, or is it going to be Mary, or both, or some other professional institution? How is this all going to work? So everybody's on board and knows, here's how things are going to look, in the future should these things arise. And I think it's very helpful to get everybody on board and understanding, and at least aware of the plan. So I think that's been a great way to make sure that we just communicate. So thank you all very much for these very helpful tips and information. We really appreciate it. Thank you, David and Amanda.
All right. Thank you.
What a great bevy of information that we learned today. And I think the most important thing is to always have a plan, right?
That's it. Got to have a plan.
So Tom, how can people get in touch with you if they have more questions about this topic?
Well, the best way to reach out to us, they can get on our website at fleishelfinancial.com. They can email me at thomas.fleishel@raymondjames.com, or they can give us a call at 386-738-1800.
And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity and Confidence for Life podcast. Click the subscribe button to be notified of new episodes when they become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests, and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Raymond James. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your individual situation. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA, and SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors Incorporated. Fleishel Financial Associates is not a broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services.
Long-term care insurance products may not be suitable for all investors. Surrender charges may apply for early withdrawals and, if made prior to age 59 and a half, may be subject to a 10% federal tax penalty in addition to any gains being taxed as ordinary income. These policies have exclusions and/or limitations. The cost and availability of long-term care insurance depend on the factors such as age, health, and the type and amount of insurance purchased. As with most financial decisions, there are expenses associated with the purchase of long-term care insurance. Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the insurance company. Please consult with a licensed financial professional when considering your insurance options.